The scratching came in threes. 3 slow, deliberate drags of claws against ancient oak. A pause thick enough to drown in. Then 3 more, identical in rhythm and pressure. Liora Ashven pressed her palm flat against the door, feeling the vibration of each stroke travel through wood weathered by 2 centuries of mountain storms. 7 months in this tower had taught her that nothing innocent sought refuge at the edge of the world. Nothing kind came calling when 3 moons rose together in a winter sky. But the sound that followed wasn't wind howling through the peaks or ice cracking in the valley far below. Before we go any further, if stories of mercy, power, and hidden kings pull you in, tap subscribe now. This channel is where forgotten souls become legends, and tell me in the comments where are you watching from. Now, let's begin. It was a whimper, distinctly canine, impossibly deep, carrying a resonance that made the stones beneath her feet hum in sympathy. The kind of sound that lived in legends her grandmother told, before the reforms, before the burnings, before the kingdom declared such creatures extinct. When Liora finally cracked the door open against screaming hinges, her breath crystallized in her throat. A wolf collapsed across her threshold. Not just any wolf, but a creature of such magnitude that even prone and bleeding, it filled the doorway with its presence. Silver-gray fur rippled over muscle and bone, darker markings tracing ancient patterns along its flanks. The massive head lifted with effort, and amber eyes, intelligent, desperate, pleading, locked onto hers. Around the creature's neck, barely visible beneath matted fur, a collar etched with silver runes that hadn't been legal to wear in 15 years. A Silverblood guardian. The Truth Keepers. The wolf's High Chancellor Morden swore had died out before Liora was born. But it was the swollen belly, heavy with unborn life, that made Lyra's hands move before her mind could catalogue all the reasons this was suicide. They sent you here to die, too, she whispered, recognizing in those amber depths the same betrayal that had burned in her own reflection 7 months ago. The same understanding that mercy and exile were just pretty words for murder. The wolf's ears flicked forward. Comprehension. If you're already hooked by what Liora is about to discover, what's coming will shatter everything you thought you knew about this kingdom. Trust me, you'll want to remember this moment when the truth finally emerges. Liora pulled her threadbare cloak tighter, but it did nothing against the cold that lived in her bones now. The tower's single room was barely larger than the medical supply closet she'd once commanded in the capital. The fire in the hearth had burned down to sullen embers, and she had perhaps 3 logs remaining before she'd need to venture into the blizzard to gather more wood, if gathering were even possible under snowdrifts taller than a man. 7 months. 7 months since the Royal Medical Council's judgment. 7 months since Physician General Thrace had torn the healer's crest from her robes in front of the assembled court, his voice ringing with righteous fury as he proclaimed her a danger to crown and kingdom. 7 months since they'd driven her through the capital gates with nothing but her healer's bag and the clothes on her back, shame burning in her chest like acid. The mountain tower wasn't officially a prison. It was medical retirement. A place to recover from the strain of service. Everyone knew the truth. No one survived winter this far north. No one was meant to. The Silverblood's breathing came in labored gasps now, each exhale sending clouds of steam into air so cold it glittered. Liora knelt beside the creature, her healer's oath warring with every survival instinct screaming that this was madness. 7 months of near starvation had left her weak. Her supplies were nearly gone. The tower was barely warm enough to keep 1 person alive, let alone a creature whose body could house 3 horses. But as she ran practiced hands over silver fur, her trained eye caught details that turned her blood to ice water. Deep gashes across the shoulders and flanks, 9, maybe 10 of them. These weren't the random tears of territorial combat or the desperate marks of a hunting accident. These were surgical. Precise. Placed with expertise to maximize blood loss while avoiding immediate fatal damage. The kind of wounds that came from soldiers who'd been trained to make deaths look natural. Someone had hunted this creature with purpose and skill. Liora cleaned the wounds with snow melted over her dying fire, using the last of her clean cloth. Her hands moved with the automatic precision of 15 years' practice, but her mind raced. As she worked, a smell rose from the deepest lacerations, sweet and cloying, like flowers left too long in a closed room. Underneath it, the distinctive metallic tang that made her stomach clench. Her hands froze mid-motion. Wolfsbane silver compound, she breathed, understanding crashing over her like an avalanche. It was a poison so rare, so restricted, that only 3 institutions in the entire kingdom had legal access to it. The Royal Alchemical Society, the King's Arsenal, and the High Chancellor's personal army. This wasn't a rogue attack. This wasn't some territorial dispute between wild creatures or poachers seeking pelts. Someone in the highest circles of power had sent soldiers with military-grade poison to execute this wolf. And judging by the creature's condition, the precise wounds, the expensive toxin, the fact that it had been driven north into exile territory, this wasn't just murder. This was assassination. The Silverblood's amber eyes opened again, fixing on Liora with an intensity that made the air between them shimmer. For a heartbeat, the world tilted sideways. Liora felt something ancient and powerful brush against her consciousness, not invasive, but questioning. Asking permission. She didn't understand how she knew what to do. Perhaps it was instinct. Perhaps it was the delirium of starvation and cold. Perhaps it was simply that she had nothing left to lose. Liora nodded. The wolf's eyes blazed silver-white. And Lyora's world exploded with images not her own, a throne room she'd never entered, a king she'd only seen from a distance, and High Chancellor Morden's face twisted with cold calculation as he gave orders to men in shadow. She saw archives burning. Saw wolves falling one by one over 20 years. Saw lies built on lies until the foundation of the kingdom itself was rotten. And she saw the truth about why this creature had fled north in winter, gravid and hunted. The pups had to be born. Tonight. During the Frostmoon Alignment that came once per century. Or everything, every sacrifice, every truth the Silverbloods had died protecting, would be lost forever. Lyora's gaze snapped to the narrow window. Through the arrow slit, she could see 2 moons already rising above the peaks. The storm was clearing. The 3rd moon would crest within hours. No pressure then, Liora muttered, looking down at the creature whose breathing was growing more labored by the minute. Whose belly rippled with movement as pups shifted within, running out of time. Whose life was now tangled inextricably with Lyora's own. A voice filled her mind, not words but pure meaning. 3 moons rise tonight. They must be born. Or all is lost. Liora grabbed her healer's bag with shaking hands. She had no midwifery tools for creatures of this scale. No texts on Silverblood anatomy, those had been burned. No assistance, no backup, no margin for error. And through the window, barely visible in the darkness below, torches. Moving up the mountain path toward her tower. They were coming to finish what they'd started. Lyora's hands moved on instinct, even as her mind struggled to process what she'd just witnessed. She dragged the massive wolf fully inside, an impossible feat that should have required 3 strong men, but adrenaline and desperation made her stronger than she had any right to be. The door slammed shut behind them, and she threw the iron bolt home with shaking fingers. The torches below were still distant. Maybe an hour. Maybe less. All right, Liora said, forcing her voice steady as she knelt beside the Silverblood. Let's see what we're working with. She laid out her meager supplies with the precision of ritual, a bone needle and sinew thread, 2 clay jars of salve made from what herbs she could scavenge, strips of cloth that had once been her spare dress. The inadequacy of it all made her want to laugh or scream. She'd once commanded a surgical theater with 20 assistants and instruments forged by master craftsmen. Now she had tools barely sufficient for stitching farmhands. As her hands worked, cleaning wounds, assessing the poison's spread, images continued to flood her consciousness. Not overwhelming this time, but gentler. Deliberate. The wolf was sharing memories, and Liora finally understood she wasn't dealing with a beast seeking shelter. She was dealing with someone who needed her to understand. 20 years ago. The image crystallized in Lyora's mind with perfect clarity. A throne room bright with morning sun. A king, not the current King Aldrich, but his father, Theron, laughing as a younger version of this same wolf paced beside him. The bond between them visible even in memory, thrumming with magic that made the air shimmer gold. You served King Theron, Liora whispered. You were his guardian. The wolf's ear flicked. Confirmation. More memories spilled forth, Silverblood wolves standing sentinel in council chambers, their mere presence compelling truth from witnesses and courtiers alike. Lies dying on tongues before they could be spoken. False oaths withering like paper in flame. The wolves didn't just guard bodies, they guarded the realm's integrity itself. Then, darkness. King Theron clutching his chest at a state dinner, face grey with sudden illness. Morden, younger than, merely a senior chancellor, rushing to his aid with a tonic. The wolf, Ashara, Liora somehow knew her name now, lunging forward in warning, but magic-bound chains manifesting from nowhere, holding her back. Her howls of warning dismissed as animal panic. Theron died 3 days later. The royal physicians declared it a heart failure. Natural causes. But Ashara had smelled the poison in Morden's medicine. Had felt the lie in his concerned expression. Had been the only witness to murder, and been silenced by spelled restraints that shouldn't have existed in the palace at all. He planned it, Liora said, horror creeping up her spine. Morden killed the king. The memory shifted. Ashara locked in the palace kennels, muzzled with spelled iron. Watching helplessly as Morden orchestrated young Prince Aldrich's coronation. The new king, barely 20 and drowning in grief, accepting Morden's counsel gratefully. Naming him High Chancellor within the month. And then the purge began. One by one, the Silverblood guardians died. A hunting accident that left Lord Vex Wolf bleeding out from a crossbow bolt. A mysterious illness that ravaged Lady Thorne's pack. All 6 wolves dead within a week, symptoms matching human poisoning but dismissed as distemper. A stable fire that claimed 3 juveniles. A cliff collapse during a mountain patrol. 20 wolves over 20 years. Each death documented as tragedy, accident, misfortune. But Ashara had felt every one through the pack bond before it severed. Had known each was murder dressed in lies. She'd fled into the deep wilderness 8 years ago, after Morden's men cornered her in the palace gardens with those same wolfsbane silver blades. She'd barely escaped, leaving them thinking she'd tumbled into the gorge. Let them believe her dead. Better to be a ghost than a target. Lyra's hands paused in their work. Then how? The memory answered before she could finish the question. 6 months ago, in a cave hidden deep in the Thorns Pine Mountains, Ashara had woken to find her body changing. No mate. No coupling. Just ancient magic responding to the kingdom's festering corruption the way a body grows a fever to burn out infection. The pups were born of pure necessity. Pure magic. Pure desperation. They would be truth incarnate. Not just able to compel honesty like their mother's generation, but to pierce any deception, reveal any hidden thing, nullify any false oath with a glance. Their power would be absolute. But only if born during the Frostmoon Alignment. Only if the 3 moons, Maiden, Mother, and Crone, rose together in perfect confluence to channel their combined magic into the birth. Miss that window, and the pups would be born mortal. Powerful perhaps, but ultimately killable. Ultimately destructible. And Morden's network was vast. He found you, Liora said, understanding. His spies discovered where you were. Ashara's memory showed men in hunter's garb, but moving with military precision. They'd found her den 2 weeks ago. She'd fled immediately, but they'd pursued with determination that spoke of substantial reward. Or substantial fear. They'd caught up to her in the high passes yesterday. The fight had been brutal. She'd killed 2 of them before the poisoned blades found their marks. Then it became a race. Could she reach sanctuary before the toxin stopped her heart? She'd sensed Liora from miles away. A healer. An exile. Someone who'd been destroyed for telling uncomfortable truths. Someone who might understand. Someone with nothing left to lose. But why me? Liora demanded, pressing cloth against a wound that wouldn't stop seeping. I'm barely surviving myself. I have no power, no resources. The sensation that flooded through her wasn't words but pure certainty. You are exactly what we need. Not power. Not resources. Compassion. Truth. The willingness to act when action seems impossible. That's a lot of faith to put in someone who was exiled for being too stupid to keep her mouth shut, Liora muttered. But her hands didn't stop working. Ashara's breathing hitched. Her massive body contracted. Once, twice. Labor pains. No, Liora said sharply. Not yet. The 3rd moon isn't up yet, and you're still full of poison. If you deliver now. Another contraction, stronger this time. Ashara whined, a sound of pure agony that made Lyra's chest constrict. Listen to me. Liora gripped the wolf's face between both hands, forcing eye contact. I need to slow the labor and purge the poison. Both at the same time. And the only way I know how to do that. She took a shaking breath. It's going to hurt. Both of us. Through the narrow window, a sound drifted up from the valley, horns. The hunting party signaling they'd found the trail. Liora looked at her supplies. At the laboring wolf. At the 2 moons visible through the arrow slit and the space where the third would soon rise. At the choice that would define what remained of her life. She opened her healer's bag and withdrew a lancet she'd hoped never to use this way. The blade was sharp enough to split hairs, and etched with symbols her grandmother had taught her before such knowledge became heresy. Blood magic, Liora said quietly. Forbidden by order of the medical council. Punishable by execution. She laughed bitterly. Good thing I'm already dead. Ashara's eyes glowed with desperate hope. Liora pressed the blade to her own palm, then to Ashara's foreleg where the fur was thinnest. This is going to create a bond between us. Your pain becomes mine. Your poison becomes mine. We share the burden until you're strong enough to deliver safely. She didn't mention the other consequence. If Ashara died, Liora would likely die with her. Some burdens couldn't be half-carried. Blood touched blood. Magic flared silver bright. And Lyra's scream joined Ashara's howl as liquid fire poured through her veins. Pain. Not the sharp, clean pain of a blade or the dull ache of hunger Liora had grown accustomed to. This was something alive, something with teeth and purpose. The wolfsbane silver compound burned through her bloodstream like molten glass, shredding everything it touched. She felt her heart stutter, then race, struggling to pump poisoned blood through narrowing vessels. But Ashara's breathing eased. The contractions slowed. It was working. Liora dragged herself upright, vision swimming. The bond pulsed between them now, a silver thread connecting her palm to Ashara's foreleg, visible only when she looked sideways at it. She could feel the wolf's exhaustion as her own, the pups moving restlessly in a womb that wasn't ready for them yet. 3 hours. They needed 3 hours for the third moon to rise and the alignment to complete. The poison would kill Liora in 2. Then we work fast, she gasped, shoving furniture against the door. The narrow bed. The single chair. The chest that held her few possessions. It wouldn't stop soldiers, but it would slow them. By minutes they desperately needed. She built up the fire with her remaining logs, coaxing reluctant flames into a proper blaze. The tower room filled with heat and light, wasteful, strategic. She'd need every bit of warmth for what was coming. For sterilization. For preventing shock. For keeping newborn pups alive in a room with a shattered door and winter howling outside. Water. She packed snow into her cooking pot and set it to boil. Laid out every scrap of cloth she owned. Found the honey she'd been hoarding, antiseptic properties, if she remembered her training correctly. Thread. Needle. The lancets still slick with their mingled blood. Her hands trembled as she worked, but they didn't stop. Couldn't stop. Because she'd done this before. Not the magic, not the impossible stakes, but the preparation. The ritual of readying instruments and space for a procedure that could save or end lives depending on her precision. 2 years ago, she'd been the youngest royal physician ever appointed. Chief of medicine at 28, with 300 healers under her supervision and the kingdom's health literally in her hands. She'd earned that position through brilliance and brutal work ethic, through diagnoses that baffled senior physicians and treatments that defied conventional wisdom. She'd been so proud. The memory rose unbidden as she arranged her makeshift surgical station, King Aldrich's face, earnest and relieved, as he'd presented her with the formula for his miracle cure. The wasting plague had been ravaging the kingdom's poorest districts for months. Victims grew weak, their bodies consuming themselves from within until nothing remained but skin and bone and agony. Morden had developed a tonic. Preliminary results were promising. The king wanted Lyra's expert opinion before mass production began. She'd spent 3 weeks analyzing that formula. Cross-referencing ingredients. Testing compounds. Running trials on tissue samples. The tonic didn't cure the wasting plague. It accelerated it. Patients who took the medicine died faster, weeks instead of months. But their final decline looked like natural progression, just more rapid. And the tonic contained trace compounds that would take years to accumulate in healthy tissue. Years of regular consumption before symptoms appeared. It was a culling disguised as a cure. Eliminate the sick quickly. Poison the poor slowly. When Lyra brought her findings to the medical council, Physician General Thrace had listened with a grave expression. Promised a thorough investigation. Asked her to keep silent until they could verify her claims, mustn't cause a panic. 3 days later, Morden himself had arrived at her laboratory with royal guards. Her research was gone. Burned, he said, in an unfortunate accident. Her tissue samples contaminated, her notes destroyed. Such a tragedy, but these things happened in medical facilities. Dangerous compounds, open flames. And really, when one examined the matter closely, hadn't Liora Ashven been showing signs of instability? Working excessive hours, making wild accusations against her betters, clearly suffering from nervous exhaustion. The trial had been swift. Evidence presented, testimony from concerned colleagues about her erratic behavior, forged journal entries describing paranoid delusions, a medical evaluation declaring her unfit for practice. King Aldrich had attended, sitting silent on his throne while Morden spoke of difficult decisions and necessary actions. The young king had looked pained but resigned, trusting his High Chancellor's judgment completely. Liora had screamed the truth until guards dragged her from the chamber. Called Morden a murderer and Thrace a coward and Aldrich a blind fool. They'd stripped her title, her rank, her identity. Then sent her north to die quietly where her accusations couldn't trouble anyone's conscience. A particularly violent contraction pulled Liora back to the present. Ashara's body spasmed, and through their bond, Liora felt everything, the pups shifting, pressing against a cervix not yet dilated enough, the poison still burning despite being halved between two bodies. No, Liora commanded, pressing her hands against Ashara's swollen belly. You hold them in. We're not ready. But labor had its own momentum. The pups were out of space, out of patience. Magic thrummed through Ashara's body, responding to the 2 moons already high and bright, anticipating the third. Liora made a decision that would have gotten her executed even before her exile. She retrieved a small vial from the very bottom of her healer's bag, a place she'd sewn a false bottom, concealing things too dangerous to discard but too valuable to abandon. The liquid inside glowed faintly blue, distilled essence of nightshade, carefully prepared to induce temporary paralysis. In the right dose, it could stop a heart. In a precise, calculated dose, it could halt labor for exactly as long as needed. Forgive me, Liora whispered, and injected half the vial directly into Ashara's haunch. The wolf's eyes went wide. Her entire body went rigid, not the rigidity of contraction, but of every muscle locked in stasis. Her breathing stopped. For 5 terrible seconds, Liora thought she'd miscalculated. That she'd just murdered the last Silverblood and her unborn legacy. Then Ashara drew one shallow breath. Another. Her heart beat once, twice, slow but steady. Labor ceased. You'll hate me when you wake fully, Liora said, already preparing a counteragent. But you'll be alive to hate me. The pounding started before she'd finished speaking. Fists against the tower door, systematic and patient. Not battering yet, testing the strength, measuring the obstacle. Liora Ashven. A male voice, cultured and calm. This is Captain Varen of the High Chancellor's elite guard. We know you harbor a dangerous creature. Surrender it immediately and you'll be treated with mercy. Liora barked a laugh that held no humor. Mercy. Like the mercy you showed when you drove poisoned blades into a pregnant guardian. Silence. Then, that creature is a threat to the kingdom. To His Majesty himself. Whatever lies it's placed in your mind. The only lies I've heard came from Morden's lips. Liora shouted. Tell me, Captain, does the king even know you're here? Or did your orders come sealed and secret, the way all Morden's murders do? Another pause. When Varen spoke again, his voice held less certainty. We have our orders. Stand aside or we breach. Then breach, Liora said, injecting the counteragent into Ashara's other haunch, carefully measured to release slowly, timed to the moon's rising. But know that when those pups are born, every lie you've told yourself about duty and service will burn away like morning fog. The battering ram struck the door once. Twice. The furniture barricade groaned. Liora checked the window. The third moon crested the eastern peak, pale and enormous. 1 hour. Maybe less. She knelt beside Ashara, whose eyes tracked her with drugged awareness, and began the most important work, preparing to deliver 3 pups who would reshape the kingdom or die trying. The door splintered. Torchlight spilled through the cracks. And Lyra's hands remained steady as she spoke the healer's oath she'd sworn 15 years ago, the true oath, not the corrupted version Morden's council had rewritten. First, do no harm. Second, preserve life. Third, speak truth regardless of consequence. She'd failed the third once. Cost her everything. She wouldn't fail again. The door exploded inward in a shower of splinters and iron. 5 soldiers poured through, crossbows raised, blades gleaming in firelight. Captain Varen entered last, a man in his 40s with silver threading his beard and eyes that had seen too many things he'd learned not to question. Those eyes widened when they found Ashara. Gods above, one soldier breathed. It's real. They're actually real. Weapons up. Varen snapped, but his voice cracked. He'd been told to hunt a dangerous beast. The creature sprawled before him was legend made flesh, a Silverblood guardian from stories his grandmother told, supposedly extinct for decades. Liora positioned herself between the soldiers and Ashara, her body pitifully small against armed men but unmovable as stone. One step closer and you murder not just a guardian, but the future she carries. That creature is an abomination, Varen said, but conviction wavered in his tone. The High Chancellor lied to you, Liora interrupted. As he's lied to everyone for 20 years. But you already suspect that, don't you, Captain? Or you wouldn't hesitate. Behind her, Ashara's body convulsed. The counteragent was taking effect, releasing the paralysis gradually. Labor resumed with vengeance, a contraction so powerful it arched the wolf's spine and pulled a howl from her throat that rattled the tower stones. She's birthing, a young soldier said, lowering his crossbow slightly. Right now. The Frostmoon Alignment happens once per century, Liora said, watching the window where 3 moons now hung in perfect vertical alignment, their combined light painting everything silver. These pups must be born in the next hour or be born powerless. Is that what Morden sent you to ensure? That truth dies before it can draw breath. Varen's jaw worked. My orders are clear. The beast and its offspring are threats too. Ashara screamed, not a howl but something terrifyingly close to human anguish. Her body contracted violently, and Liora spun, hands moving with practiced speed. She could see the first pup crowning, silver fur slick with birth fluids. Shoot me if you must, Liora said without looking back, but I'm delivering these pups. My oath demands it. Her fingers worked carefully, supporting the emerging head, clearing the birth canal. The pup slid free into her waiting hands, perfect, tiny, fur gleaming like starlight. It mewled weakly, and Lyra's heart clenched at the sound. She severed the umbilical cord with her lancet, cleared the pup's airway, rubbed its chest vigorously until the mewling strengthened. Then she placed the newborn against Ashara's belly where maternal warmth could sustain it. The soldiers stood frozen, crossbows still raised but no longer aimed. They watched with expressions somewhere between horror and wonder. Captain, one whispered. This doesn't feel right. Varen said nothing. The second pup came faster, smaller than its sibling, darker silver with unusual black markings tracing patterns across its back. Liora repeated the process. Cord, airway, stimulation, placement. This one cried louder, indignant at its sudden cold world. Both newborns began making sounds that shouldn't have been possible, melodic, resonant, impossibly complex for creatures minutes old. The noise vibrated through the tower, through the bones of everyone present. The young soldier who'd spoken earlier stumbled backward, crossbow clattering to stone. What am I doing here? His voice held genuine confusion, as if waking from a dream. We're murdering a mother in childbirth. Why are we? Silence. Varen barked, but his own weapon lowered fractionally. The third pup emerged in terrible silence. Lyra's hands received the small body automatically, performing the ritual motions. But even as she cut the cord and cleared the mouth, she knew. The chest didn't rise. The limbs hung limp. The fur was grey as ash, dull where its siblings gleamed. No, Liora breathed. She rubbed the pup's chest harder, desperately. Bent to breathe into tiny lungs. No. Come on. Breathe. Nothing. Ashara released a sound that would haunt Lyra's nightmares forever, maternal grief so profound it transcended species. The wolf tried to rise, to reach her stillborn pup, but her body was spent from poison and labor and loss. Even the soldiers looked stricken. Varen's weathered face showed naked pain. Liora cradled the tiny grey body, tears cutting tracks through the blood and fluids on her cheeks. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I wasn't fast enough, the poison. Light exploded through the arrow-slit window. 3 moonbeams, white, silver, and pale blue, converged into a single shaft of radiance that struck the stillborn pup directly. The body in Liara's hands blazed incandescent, too bright to look at directly. She felt power coursing through the tiny form, ancient magic older than the kingdom itself responding to death with furious denial. The pup's chest rose. Eyes opened, not amber like wolf eyes should be, but pure molten silver, bright as captured starlight. The other 2 pups' eyes transformed instantly to match, their infant gazes suddenly ancient and terrible and beautiful. All 3 released a harmonic cry that shattered the remaining window glass. Every person in the tower froze, not paralyzed physically, but held by something far more profound. Compulsion magic woven into sound itself, demanding witness, demanding truth. Captain Varen dropped to his knees as if strings had been cut. His face contorted with horror as memories crashed over him, 20 years of following orders revealed in their full, ugly reality. The Riverdale pack, he gasped. They had cubs. 5 cubs. We were told they'd gone feral, attacking merchants. But they hadn't, they were just hunting, feeding their young. And we. The young soldier who'd questioned earlier began weeping. The healer in Westmarch. Old man who treated plague victims for free. We arrested him for sedition, said he was spreading panic. He died in custody from natural causes. But we beat him. I held him down while. Stop, another soldier begged, but the confessions continued pouring out, truth ripping through carefully constructed justifications. The pup's silver eyes pulsed with light that spread beyond the tower. Liora felt it radiating outward like ripples on water, touching everything, revealing everything. In the capital, a merchant woke screaming, remembering the bribes that had ruined his competitor. In the northern garrison, a commander saw clearly the innocents he'd executed on forged evidence. In Morden's own estate, servants confronted participation in poisonings they'd convinced themselves were medicine. The kingdom was experiencing collective revelation, truth forced into consciousness, lies burning away under silver light. Ashara's breathing changed. Grew shallow. Labored. Lyra's attention snapped back as their blood bond flared with warning. The wolf's eyes, still amber and warm, found hers. Thank you. No, Liora said fiercely, crawling to Ashara's great head. You stay. They need their mother. They have you now, keeper. Silver light flowed from Ashara to Lyra's wrist like water finding its level. The mark burned itself into her skin, a wolf encircling stars, ancient seal of the Silverblood keepers. Knowledge flooded her mind, centuries of guardianship, the duties and powers of the bond, the responsibility she now carried. Ashara's last breath sounded like peace. The 3 pups gathered around Liora, pressing against her legs, their silver eyes luminous with intelligence far beyond their minutes of life. They looked at her with recognition. With trust. With expectation. Through the shattered doorway, new sounds, horns echoing across the valley. More soldiers approaching, hundreds by the sound. But these weren't hunting calls. They were signals of confusion, of orders questioned, of ranks breaking. Truth had arrived in the kingdom. And it was hungry. Silence filled the tower, thick, broken only by crackling fire and the soft mewling of 3 newborn pups. Liora knelt beside Ashara's body, one hand resting on silver fur that was already cooling. The oath bond mark on her wrist pulsed with each beat of her heart, a constant reminder that she now carried something far larger than herself. The soldiers hadn't moved. 5 men stood or knelt in various states of emotional collapse, weapons forgotten, faces wet with tears or blank with shock. Captain Varen stared at his hands as if seeing them for the first time, as if the blood staining them for 20 years had suddenly become visible. Captain. Lyra's voice cut through the stupor. How many more are coming? Varen blinked slowly, surfacing from whatever personal hell the pup's truth sight had shown him. The full battalion. 200 men. Morden's elite forces. His voice was hollow. He called it a training exercise. Said we were hunting a rogue wolf threatening settlements. But you know better now. I know, Varen's voice cracked. Gods forgive me, I know everything now. Every lie we swallowed. Every innocent he couldn't finish. The youngest soldier, barely 20, Liora noted, wiped his face with shaking hands. What do? We can't go back. Not after seeing who you really are. Liora stood, carefully gathering the 3 pups against her chest. They were warm, impossibly alert, their silver eyes tracking everything with unnerving intelligence. That's truth's burden, soldier. Once you see clearly, you can't unsee. Through the broken window, torches multiplied in the valley below, a constellation of fire spreading across the darkness. The approaching battalion. And somewhere among those men, likely in a comfortable command tent far from danger, High Chancellor Morden would be waiting for confirmation of the hunt's success. Waiting for the last Silverblood line to be extinguished. We have perhaps an hour before they arrive, Liora said, assessing their situation with a healer's clinical detachment. 3 newborn pups who couldn't walk yet. A dead guardian whose body deserved better than being left on a tower floor. 5 soldiers experiencing moral crisis. Herself, exhausted, still fighting poison in her veins, with no plan beyond surviving the next minute. The odds were not favorable. One of the pups, the smallest, the one born dead and resurrected, squirmed in her arms and fixed its silver gaze on the wounded soldier nearest them. The man had taken a defensive wound during their breach, a gash across his forearm that bled steadily through makeshift bandaging. The pup made a soft sound, almost questioning. Then wriggled free of Liora's grasp with surprising strength and approached the soldier on unsteady legs. Before anyone could react, the pup pressed its nose against the bloody bandage. Silver light flared. The soldier gasped, jerking backward, but not from pain. From shock. He unwrapped the cloth with trembling fingers, revealing smooth, unmarked skin where moments ago a wound had gaped. Merciful gods, Varen breathed. They can heal. Liora's mind raced, pieces falling into terrible, wonderful place. The Silverbloods hadn't just been truth keepers. They'd been restorers. Capable of revealing corruption and healing what it damaged. That's why Morden had needed them eliminated, not just because they exposed his lies, but because they could undo the harm those lies caused. The other 2 pups gathered around their sibling, creating a small circle of silver-eyed judgment and mercy. They looked at Liora expectantly. Through the oath bond, she felt their intention as clearly as speech. Show us what needs mending. The kingdom, Liora whispered. Everything. But we start by surviving long enough to try. She turned to Varen, seeing him clearly now, not as an enemy but as a man confronting 2 decades of choices he could finally see honestly. Captain, I need to know, are you with us or against us? Varen stood slowly, his weathered face aging years in moments. I've spent my life following orders without question, believing I served honor and duty. The pups showed me what I really served. His hand moved to his sword hilt, and for one terrible second Liora thought she'd miscalculated. Then he drew the blade and drove it point first into the stone floor between them. I won't follow those orders anymore, he said quietly. Whatever comes next, these creatures, these pups, they deserve protection. Deserve to live long enough to. He gestured helplessly at the window, at the kingdom beyond. To finish what they started. The other 4 soldiers exchanged glances. Then, one by one, they planted their weapons in the floor beside their captains. We're with you, the young one said. We've done enough damage following Morden's lies. Liora felt something crack in her chest, not breaking but opening. She'd been alone for 7 months, exiled and abandoned, certain she would die friendless in this tower. Now she stood with 5 soldiers who'd come to kill her and instead chose truth. It wasn't much of an army. But it was a beginning. Then we prepare, Liora said, already moving. Varen, your men know standard siege tactics. What's our best defensive position? The tower itself, Varen answered immediately, his military training reasserting itself around this new moral framework. Stone walls, narrow entrance, high ground. But with the door breached. We rebuild the barricade. Better this time. Liora gestured to the scattered furniture. And we prepare surprises for anyone who breaches it again. As the soldiers worked, Liora tended to the pups and prepared Ashara's body with what dignity she could manage. The great wolf deserved ceremony, deserved honor. Instead, she got a healer's gentle hands and whispered promises that her death wouldn't be meaningless. The pups gathered around their mother one last time, small noses pressed to silver fur. They made soft sounds, not quite mourning, but acknowledgement. Understanding that this was goodbye. Then the smallest approached Liora again. Through the oath bond, she felt its request as clearly as words. Your wound. Still poison. She'd almost forgotten, the wolfsbane silver compound still burning through her veins, the blood bond that had saved Ashara's pups but was slowly killing Liora herself. I'm fine, she lied. 3 sets of silver eyes fixed on her with identical expressions of patient skepticism. All right, Liora admitted. I'm dying. But slowly. We have time. The pups moved as one, pressing against her legs. Their combined warmth flared into something more, silver light pouring into her body through every point of contact. The poison burned away like morning fog under sun. Liora felt her heart steady, her breathing ease, strength returning to exhausted limbs. When they stepped back, she felt better than she had in months. Better than she had since exile. Thank you, she whispered. The smallest pup, she decided to call it Silverlight, for its resurrection, tilted its head as if to say obviously. A horn blast echoed from the valley, different from the others. Veren's expression darkened. That's Morden's signal. Personal command override. He's here. Through the window, the torch field organized itself into military precision. Ranks forming. Siege equipment being unloaded from supply wagons. And in the center, visible even from this distance, a command pavilion flying the High Chancellor's crimson banner. Veren studied the deployment with professional assessment. His brought everything short of an actual army. Crossbows, battering engines, mags to bring down the tower if necessary. His eyes met Lyra's. His not leaving anything to chance. Good, Liora said, surprising herself with the steel in her voice. Neither are we. She gathered the 3 pups, holding them where they could see the approaching forces. Your mother died protecting you. These soldiers, she gestured to Veren and his men, have chosen truth over comfortable lies. Now we make our stand. Not because we can win, but because someone must. The pup's eyes blazed brighter. And far below, Morden's magically amplified voice rolled across the mountain like thunder. Liora Ashven. You harbor abominations against the crown. Surrender them now and you may yet live to serve your kingdom. Liora stepped to the shattered window, cradling 3 impossible creatures against her chest. High Chancellor, she shouted back, her voice raw but carrying. These abominations have done more for truth in 1 hour than your reign has done in 20 years. Dangerous silence. Then Morden's voice, colder now, so be it. Captain Veren, complete your mission. That's an order. Inside the tower, Veren looked at his planted sword. At the pups with their silver eyes. At the woman who'd chosen compassion over survival. He walked to the window and shouted down, Captain Veren reporting, Chancellor. I regret to inform you that I am relieved of duty. Effective immediately. The silence that followed was absolute. Then, traitor. You're all contaminated. I want that tower reduced to rubble. Kill everything inside. The battalion surged forward. And 3 newborn pups began to glow like captured stars. We can't hold this position, Veren said, watching siege ladders being assembled below. Not against 200 men and battle mags. Lyra's mind raced through impossible calculations. The pups were hours old, couldn't walk properly yet, and their power, however vast, was untested beyond revealing truth. Against crossbow bolts and demolition magic, truth wouldn't matter if they were crushed under falling stone. There's another way out, one of Veren's men said suddenly. Old smuggler route. My grandfather helped build this tower, told stories about passages through the mountain. Emergency exits for when the border wars turned bad. Show me, Liora commanded. They found it in the cellar, a narrow opening behind stacked crates that hadn't been moved in decades. The passage beyond exhaled cold air that smelled of earth and centuries. It's a 3-mile tunnel through the mountain, the soldier explained. Emerges in a forest glen on the eastern slope. But it's been abandoned for 50 years. Could be collapsed, flooded. Better than certainty of death here, Veren said. He looked at his remaining men. I'm going with the healer. Anyone who stays can claim they were spelled, coerced. Morden might show mercy. Morden doesn't know the meaning of mercy, the young soldier said. We're coming. Outside, The battering ram struck the tower door once. Twice. Stone dust rained from the ceiling. They gathered what little they could carry: Liora's medical bag, 2 soldiers' packs with rations, water skins, weapons. Liora fashioned a sling from her cloak to carry the pups against her chest, where body heat would keep them warm. The 3 nestled together, silver eyes dimming to conserve energy. They understood the danger, she realized. Were adapting to it. As they descended into the passage, Liora took one last look at Ashara's body. "I'll come back for you," she whispered. "When it's safe. When your pups have changed the kingdom enough that you can rest with honor." The tower shook as the battering ram struck again. They pulled the cellar entrance closed behind them and entered darkness. The tunnel was everything the soldier had warned: cramped, unstable, filled with the smell of stagnant water and rot. They moved single file with a single torch, Varen leading, Liora in the middle with the pups, the other soldiers guarding their rear. Behind them, muffled by stone and distance, an explosion. The tower collapsing. "Keep moving," Varen urged. "They'll search the rubble. When they don't find bodies, they'll look for escape routes." But something was happening that none of them could see in the darkness. The pups, pressed against Liora's chest, continued their work. Truth sight didn't require eyes. It radiated outward like heat from a fire, passing through stone and earth and distance. In the valley below, soldiers preparing to storm the ruined tower suddenly stopped. Memories flooded unwanted into consciousness. Orders followed without question, violence committed without reflection, lies accepted because questioning was dangerous. A sergeant remembered the family he'd evicted from their farm on charges of sedition. How the children had cried. How the father had insisted they were innocent, that the accusations were fabricated by a neighbor who wanted their land. How the sergeant had ignored those pleas because orders were orders. Now, with crystalline clarity, he saw the truth. The neighbor had bribed an official. The family had been innocent. They'd died that winter, homeless in the cold. The sergeant dropped his weapon and walked away from the battalion. Just walked. Heading south toward villages that might still remember that family. Toward whatever redemption might be possible. He wasn't alone. Across the encampment, men were experiencing similar revelations. Some wept. Some raged. Some simply stood frozen, confronting choices they'd made when truth was conveniently obscured. The battalion was fracturing. In the capital, 200 miles south, a merchant woke from sleep with a gasp. He'd built his fortune through careful manipulation. Bribes here, blackmail there, competitors destroyed through strategic rumors. He'd told himself it was just business, just survival in a competitive market. Now he saw faces, the rival whose warehouse he'd burned. The inspector he'd paid to overlook safety violations. The worker who'd died because of those violations, leaving 3 children orphaned. The merchant stumbled to his writing desk and began composing confessions, hands shaking so badly he could barely hold the pen. Across the kingdom, in villages and cities, barracks and manor houses, people were waking to truth. The pup's power rippled outward like a stone dropped in still water, and every ripple revealed something hidden, forced recognition of something ignored. Liora felt it through the oath bond, the sheer scope of revelations spreading across the realm. It was overwhelming, beautiful, and terrifying. "What's happening?" Varen asked, noticing her stumble. "The pups," Liora managed. "They're still working. Everyone who participated in Morden's corruption, everyone who looked away, everyone who chose comfortable lies, they're all seeing truth now. Simultaneously. The entire kingdom. Everyone who needs to." They emerged from the tunnel as dawn broke, grey light filtering through pine trees heavy with snow. The forest glen was silent except for wind through branches and their own labored breathing. They'd made it. Behind them, no sounds of pursuit. Yet, Liora unwrapped the pups, checking them quickly. All 3 were exhausted from the night's exertions but healthy. Silverlight, the smallest, looked up at her with those ancient silver eyes and radiated a feeling through the bond: hungry. "We all are," Liora said. "But first we need distance." They moved east, away from the collapsed tower and Morden's fragmenting battalion. Varen led them through game trails he knew from border patrols, paths that avoided main roads but provided cover. By mid-morning, they encountered the first refugees. A family, father, mother, 3 children, huddled around a fire that produced more smoke than heat. They looked up with fear when 5 soldiers emerged from the trees, then confusion when they saw Liora carrying something wrapped in her cloak. "Please," the father said, standing with empty hands raised. "We're just traveling. We have nothing worth taking." "We're not here to rob you," Varen said, then seemed unsure what else to say. How did one explain they were deserters fleeing their own army? The mother's eyes found Lyora's, found the bundle she carried. "What are you holding?" Liora hesitated, then made a choice. She pulled back the cloak enough to reveal 3 small faces, 3 sets of glowing silver eyes. The family gasped. "Silverbloods," the father breathed. "They are real. The stories are true," Liora confirmed. "And they're why the High Chancellor is hunting us." "Because they show truth," the mother said slowly. Understanding dawned on her face. "Last night, I woke with memories. Things I'd done, things I'd ignored. My sister, I knew her husband beat her, but I told myself it wasn't my business. And now she's dead, and I never." She couldn't finish. The father put an arm around her, his own face haunted. "We're all carrying that weight this morning," Varen said quietly. "The pups have given the kingdom a gift. Painful but necessary." The youngest child, a girl perhaps 6 years old, approached Liora without fear. "Can I see them?" Liora knelt, bringing the pups to eye level. The girl reached out with one small hand, and Silverlight pressed its nose to her palm. The child giggled, pure, uncomplicated joy. "They're warm. And they like me. They can sense innocence," Liora realized. "They show truth to adults because adults build lies. But children still see clearly," the mother finished. "Oh, what a world they'll make possible." The family shared what little food they had, dried meat, stale bread, water from a nearby stream. In return, Varen offered them protection to the nearest settlement and warnings about which roads to avoid. As they prepared to part ways, the father gripped Lyora's arm. "You're taking them to the capital, aren't you? To show the king. If we survive long enough." "Then survive," the man said fiercely. "My sister died because I was too cowardly to act. Don't let her death, don't let any of the deaths, be meaningless. Make the kingdom face what it's become." They continued south as the day wore on, and everywhere they went, they found evidence of the previous night's revelation. A village guard sitting outside the jail, weeping, having realized the prisoners inside were innocent. A tax collector burning his falsified ledgers. A priest kneeling in the snow, confronting years of sermons that prioritized comfort over truth. The kingdom was convulsing with enforced honesty. But not everyone chose redemption. They heard the hunting party before they saw it, dogs baying, horses thundering through forest. Varen cursed and pushed them off the trail into heavy underbrush. "Morden's elite trackers," he whispered. "Men who've had their consciences burned out through dark magic. The pup's truth sight won't touch them." 6 riders burst into view, followed by massive hounds with red eyes that glowed with unnatural light. They wore black armor marked with the High Chancellor's crimson seal, and their faces showed no expression, not determination, not anger. Nothing human at all. One of the hounds caught their scent and bayed triumphantly. The riders turned as one, drawing weapons that hummed with enchantment. "Run," Varen commanded, pushing Liora ahead. "We'll hold them." "No." Liora held her ground, unwrapping the pups fully. "We're done running." The 3 Silverbloods stood on shaky legs, facing the approaching hunters. Their eyes blazed like stars, and the air between them and their pursuers shimmered with building power. The riders charged. The pups released a pulse of silver light that struck like a physical blow. It washed over the enchanted hunters, seeking truth, seeking the core of who they'd been before dark magic hollowed them out. For a heartbeat, nothing happened. Then the lead rider screamed, not in pain but in horror. His enchantments shattered like glass, and suddenly he could see again, could feel again, could remember every atrocity committed while his soul was bound. He saw clearly what he'd become. The other 5 collapsed from their horses, writhing as their own enchantments broke. The hounds whimpered and fled. When the light faded, 6 men lay in the snow, weeping or catatonic or simply staring at the sky with expressions of absolute devastation. "What did they show them?" the young soldier asked. "Everything," Liora said. "Every choice that led them to surrender their humanity. Every moment they could have chosen differently and didn't. One of the former hunters looked up at her with hollow eyes. Kill us. Please. We've done things we don't deserve. You'll live, Liora said, not unkindly but firm. You'll carry that weight and use it. The kingdom needs witnesses who understand what Morden's corruption truly costs. They left the broken hunters behind and continued south. The capital's spires became visible on the horizon by dusk, still a day's hard travel away. Between them and the city, Morden's full might gathering for one final confrontation. Liora held the exhausted pups close. They'd walked perhaps 4 miles on their new legs today, an impossible feat for newborns, but then everything about them was impossible. Tomorrow, she told them softly. Tomorrow we show the king what his kingdom has become. Tomorrow we finish what your mother started. Silverlight looked up at her with eyes like captured moonlight and radiated a feeling that might have been agreement or might have been love. Either way, Liora held on tight. The capital's gates stood open, not in welcome but in chaos. Citizens packed the streets, shouting, weeping, demanding answers. The city guard had abandoned their posts or stood paralyzed by their own revelations. Smoke rose from the merchant quarter where someone had set fire to a warehouse full of falsified trade records. In the temple district, priests and congregants alike knelt in the streets, confessing sins to anyone who would listen. The kingdom's capital was tearing itself apart with truth. Liora pulled her hood low and kept the pups hidden as Varen led them through back alleys toward the palace. They moved like ghosts through a city that no longer recognized itself, past scenes of anguish and rage and occasionally, heartbreakingly, forgiveness. It's worse than I expected, Varen muttered, guiding them around a crowd that had cornered a former magistrate and was demanding he answer for every false judgment he'd rendered. It's exactly as bad as it always was, Liora corrected. Now people just can't ignore it. The palace loomed ahead, white marble spires that had symbolized justice and order for 3 centuries. Today, they looked like tombstones marking the death of comfortable lies. Getting inside proved easier than expected. The guards recognized Varen despite his desertion, and their own moral crises left them unable to care about protocol. They waved the group through with hollow eyes, too broken to question or resist. The palace interior echoed with absence. Servants had fled or barricaded themselves in quarters. Courtiers huddled in rooms, avoiding eye contact with anyone who might force them to confront shared knowledge of corruption. The grand halls that should have bustled with administrative activity stood silent as tombs. Where's the king? Liora demanded of a passing steward. The man laughed, high and brittle. Which king? The one who thought he ruled? Or the one who actually did? He pointed toward the throne room with a shaking hand, then hurried away, muttering about resignation and redemption and how some stains never washed clean. They approached the throne room's massive doors, carved oak inlaid with gold, depicting the kingdom's founding. Varen tried the handles. Unlocked. It's a trap, the young soldier said. Has to be. Of course it is, Liora agreed. But we're out of other options. She pushed the doors open. The throne room stretched before them, a chamber built to inspire awe with its vaulted ceilings and stained glass windows casting colored light across marble floors. But the man sitting on the throne wasn't King Aldrich. High Chancellor Morden lounged on the seat of power like he'd been born to it, one leg crossed over the other, fingers steepled beneath his chin. He was younger than Liora expected, perhaps 50, with iron-grey hair and a face that would have been handsome if not for the cold intelligence in his eyes. The crown sat on a cushion beside him. Casual. Dismissed. Liora Ashven, Morden said, voice carrying effortlessly through the empty chamber. You've caused remarkable chaos. I'm almost impressed. Where's King Aldrich? Liora demanded. Indisposed. His Majesty has been overwhelmed by recent events. I've assumed temporary authority to manage the crisis your abominations created. Varen's hand went to his sword. You have no authority to. I have every authority. Morden's facade cracked for a moment, showing genuine anger beneath calculated calm. For 20 years, I've held this kingdom together through pragmatic decisions no one else had the stomach to make. Eliminated threats. Streamlined inefficiencies. Made us strong while weak men like Theron dreamed of justice and mercy. You murdered King Theron, Liora said. I saved the kingdom from his weakness. Do you know what he planned? Universal education. Redistributing crown lands to peasants. Abolishing debtors' prisons. Beautiful ideals that would have bankrupted us within a decade and left us vulnerable to Valdris's enemies. Morden stood, descending the throne steps with theatrical grace. I did what was necessary. Yes, some innocents died. Yes, certain truths were obscured. But the kingdom thrived. We had 20 years of prosperity, stability, growth. The ends justified the means. Tell that to the families you destroyed, Varen said. Acceptable losses in service of the greater good. Morden's eyes found the bundle in Lyra's arms. And now you bring those creatures here. Do you have any idea what you've done? The kingdom is fragmenting. People are abandoning their posts, confessing crimes, drowning in guilt. Your truth is destroying us faster than any enemy army could. Good, Lyra said. Let it burn. Build something honest from the ashes. Morden smiled, cold and utterly without humor. You still don't understand. I'm offering you a choice, healer. Give me those pups. Let me contain them, study them, ensure their power is used responsibly. In exchange, I'll restore your position, your reputation, your life. You'll be chief royal physician again, with resources beyond imagining to continue your work. Contain them, Lyra repeated flatly. You mean kill them? Eventually. Once we've understood how their power works and developed countermeasures. But I'm not unreasonable. They could live comfortably for years while we study them. The pups stirred in Lyra's arms, silver eyes opening. Through the oath bond, she felt their response to Morden's words. Not fear, but something like pity. They saw him so clearly, a man who'd convinced himself that atrocity in service of order was virtue. No, Lyra said simply. Morden's expression hardened. Then you choose destruction. For yourself and for them. He raised one hand. The throne room's side doors burst open, and soldiers poured through, 50, 60, more. These weren't the conflicted men who'd defected with Varen. These were fresh troops from distant garrisons, men who hadn't been touched by the pup's truth sight yet, who still believed they served honor. Crossbows leveled at Lyra's small group. I gave you mercy, Morden said. You refused it. Captain Varen, complete your original mission. Kill the beasts. That's a direct order from the acting regent. Varen planted his feet beside Lyra. I don't take orders from murderers anymore. Then you die with her. Morden gestured. Crossbows began to fire. A voice thundered through the chamber, hold. King Aldrich burst through a concealed entrance behind the throne, sword drawn, royal guard at his back. He was younger than Lyra expected, perhaps 35, with dark hair and eyes that burned with fury and something else. Grief, she realized. Overwhelming grief. Step away from my throne, Morden. The High Chancellor didn't move. Your Majesty, you're clearly not well. Recent events have shown me the truth. Aldrich's voice cracked. I've spent the last day locked in my own chambers, experiencing what everyone else in the kingdom experienced. Seeing clearly for the first time in my entire reign. He advanced on Morden, sword steady. My father. You murdered my father. I saved the kingdom from. My brother. You drugged him, declared him mad, had him institutionalized. He was perfectly sane. He just questioned your policies. Morden's hand moved toward a concealed weapon. Every treaty I signed, Aldrich continued, voice breaking. Every war I authorized. Every execution I approved. All based on intelligence you fabricated. I've been a puppet king, dancing on your strings for 20 years, and I was too blind to see it. You were too weak. Morden snarled, finally losing composure. Just like your father. The kingdom needed strength, not sentiment. I gave us that strength. You gave us corruption masquerading as order. Lyra stepped forward, lowering her hood, pulling back the cloth to reveal 3 small faces with silver eyes. Your Majesty, I am Liora Ashven, exiled healer. And these are the last of the Silverblood guardians, born during the Frostmoon Alignment. They've come to show you what your kingdom truly is. Aldrich's eyes widened as he recognized what she held. The Silverbloods. But they're extinct. Another of Morden's lies, Lyra said. Their mother died protecting them. And they've spent their first day of life revealing 2 decades of corruption to everyone who participated in it. Show me, Aldrich said. I need to see everything. Not just what I experienced locked in my room. Everything. Liora looked at the pups. They gazed back with those ancient, knowing eyes. Through the bond, she felt their question. Are you certain? This will break him. He needs to be broken, Liora said aloud. We all do. That's how we heal. The pup's eyes blazed. Silver light exploded through the throne room, engulfing Aldrich where he stood. The king gasped, then screamed, dropping to his knees as 20 years of truth crashed over him in moments. He saw his father's murder in perfect detail. Saw Morden's hand pouring poison into wine while Theron toasted his son's upcoming wedding. Saw the old king realize what was happening, saw him look desperately for Ashara, but the wolf was chained elsewhere, unable to help. He saw his brother, gentle, bookish Tamlin, questioning trade agreements that enriched Morden's allies. Saw the medicine that made Tamlin paranoid and erratic. Saw him dragged away to an asylum, screaming that he wasn't mad, that someone was poisoning him. Saw him die there, alone and terrified, 3 years later. He saw wars begun on fabricated intelligence. Enemies created through diplomatic sabotage. Battles where young soldiers died for lies dressed as noble causes. He saw Lyora's trial, the forged evidence, the coerced testimony, Morden orchestrating every detail while Aldrich sat on his throne and believed what he was told. He saw 1,000 smaller betrayals, innocents executed, families destroyed, corruption flourishing while he signed documents and made speeches and truly believed he was serving his kingdom well. When the light faded, Aldrich knelt on the marble floor, crown forgotten beside him, tears streaming down his face. 20 years, he whispered. 20 years and I never saw. Never questioned. Gods forgive me, I never even thought to look. Don't ask the gods for forgiveness, Liora said, not unkindly. Ask your people. Morden backed toward the throne, hand closing on a concealed lever. If I can't rule this kingdom, then no one will. He pulled. Gas hissed from hidden vents throughout the throne room, visible as green mist, smelling of chemicals and death. Soldiers nearest the vents collapsed immediately, convulsing. Nightshade compound, Morden said calmly as chaos erupted. Enough to kill everyone in this chamber within minutes. We die together, Your Majesty. The kingdom gets its clean slate after all. People fled for the doors, trampling each other in panic. The gas spread fast, filling the vast chamber. Liora felt it burn her lungs with the first breath, felt her vision darken. The pups remained calm in her arms, their silver eyes fixed on the spreading poison with something like curiosity. Then they stood, all three, on legs still uncertain, on a platform they fashioned from Lyora's arms. Their eyes linked, creating a circuit of power between them. And they sang. Not howling, not crying, singing. 3 voices in perfect harmony, a sound that bypassed ears and resonated directly in the soul. The throne room's air shimmered, and Liora watched in awe as the green poison gas began to change. It transmuted from deadly toxin to harmless silver mist, purifying itself in response to the pup's power. The transformation spread outward in waves. Everywhere their song touched, corruption became clarity, poison became peace. The mist cleared. Collapsed soldiers gasped back to life, lungs healed of damage. The chamber filled with light that seemed to emanate from the very stones themselves. And throughout the palace, throughout the city, throughout the kingdom, every hidden thing became visible. Secret chambers revealed themselves. Concealed documents burst from walls where they'd been sealed. Buried evidence unearthed itself. The physical architecture of lies that Morden had built over 20 years dissolved, leaving only truth. Morden staggered, his final contingency plan failing. He drew a blade, sleek and poisoned, and lunged not at Aldrich but at the pups. Liora threw herself between them and the High Chancellor's killing strike. The blade punched through her chest with a cold shock that stole all breath. She fell, blood spreading across white marble, her last thought that at least the pups were safe. The last thing she heard before darkness, 3 voices, singing her name. Pain. Not the sharp shock of the blade entering her chest, but something far more profound. Liora felt as if every choice she'd ever made was being examined, weighed, measured against some cosmic standard she couldn't comprehend. She saw herself at 15, choosing medicine over her family's trade business, disappointing her father but following her calling. At 23, reporting a senior physician for negligence, losing friendships but saving lives. At 28, accepting the chief physician position while knowing the politics would be brutal. And 7 months ago, bringing evidence of poison to the medical council despite knowing it might destroy her. Every moment she'd chosen truth over comfort. Every time compassion had warred with self-preservation and compassion won. The examination wasn't judgment, it was recognition. Acknowledgement that she'd earned what came next. Silver light poured into her wound from 3 small sources. The pups pressed their noses to her chest where Morden's blade had pierced, and their combined power flowed into her like liquid starlight. Not just healing tissue but healing everything, the lingering poison from the blood bond, the malnutrition from 7 months of exile, the exhaustion of spirit that came from being betrayed by the world she'd served. Scars formed across her chest in silver patterns, beautiful and terrible. Marks of death survived, of transformation owned. Liora gasped back to life. The throne room swam into focus. Aldrich knelt beside her, one hand pressed to her shoulder, his face wet with tears. Varen and his soldiers formed a protective circle. And the pups, her pups now, she understood, gazed at her with eyes that held something like pride. Welcome back, Keeper. Silverlight's voice resonated through the oath bond. Beyond their protective circle, Morden lay dying. Aldrich's sword had found its mark after the High Chancellor struck Liora. The wound was mortal, and no healing magic would save him. The pup's power flowed where truth and redemption were possible, and Morden had placed himself beyond both. But the silver light touched him anyway, not healing but revealing. In his final moments, Morden saw with perfect clarity every choice that had led him here. Every compromise that seemed reasonable at the time. Every atrocity justified as necessity. The slow transformation from idealistic young chancellor who genuinely wanted to serve into a monster who'd convinced himself that control and service were the same thing. He wept. Not for his death, but for what he'd become without noticing. I thought. He gasped, blood on his lips. I thought I was saving us. When did I? The first time you chose power over people, Liora said, her voice still rough from resurrection. And every time after became easier. Morden's eyes found hers. Would you, if you could, forgive? That's not mine to give, Liora said. Ask the ones you harmed. In whatever comes after this. He died with that terrible knowledge, that redemption existed but he'd run out of time to seek it. The throne room doors burst open. Not soldiers this time, but citizens, hundreds of them, flooding into the palace now that guards no longer barred their way. They came with questions, accusations, demands for justice. The weight of revelation had driven them from their homes into the streets, and now they wanted answers from the king who'd ruled them unknowingly. Aldrich stood slowly, retrieving his crown from where it had fallen. He looked at it for a long moment, that circle of gold that had symbolized authority he'd never truly possessed. Then he set it on the throne's seat and stepped down to meet his people at ground level. I have failed you, he said, voice carrying through the massive chamber. For 20 years, I believed I ruled with wisdom and justice. I was blind. Willfully, catastrophically blind. Every policy that enriched the powerful while crushing the vulnerable, every war fought on false pretense, every innocent imprisoned or executed, I authorized them all. The crowd's anger was palpable, filling the air like heat. You could claim ignorance, someone shouted. Blame Morden and walk away clean. I could, Aldrich agreed. But that would be another lie. I chose not to look too closely at convenient intelligence. Chose not to question advisors who told me what I wanted to hear. Chose comfort over truth. He gestured to where Morden's body lay. He was the architect of corruption, but I was the foundation it was built on. Silence rippled through the crowd. So I am offering you a choice, Aldrich continued. I will abdicate if that is what you demand. We can hold elections, establish a republic, reshape governance entirely. Or, he paused, meeting eyes throughout the crowd. Or we rebuild together. A constitutional monarchy with transparency and accountability. Commoners on the council. Open trials for every crime committed under Morden's regime. Reparations for families destroyed by false charges. Truth as our foundation instead of our enemy. Why should we trust you? A woman called out. You ruled for 20 years and saw nothing. You shouldn't, Aldrich said simply. Trust isn't given, it's earned through consistent action over time. All I'm asking is the chance to try. To spend however many years I have remaining proving that people can change when they finally see clearly. Liora stood, the pups gathered at her feet, and walked to Aldrich's side. He's right that trust must be earned. But I've seen inside his heart through these pups' power. He's genuinely broken by what he's learned. That brokenness is where growth begins. She addressed the crowd directly. The kingdom is yours to shape now. You've all seen truth, your own and others. That's a terrible gift, but it's also liberation. You can choose vengeance, tearing down everything and everyone who participated in corruption. Many deserve that fate. The pups moved through the crowd, small bodies weaving between legs, silver eyes meeting everyone they passed. Where they walked, tension eased slightly, not because truth became less painful, but because people felt seen, acknowledged, their suffering recognized. Or, Liora continued, you can choose the harder path. Justice without cruelty. Accountability with possibility of redemption. A kingdom rebuilt not on comfortable lies or satisfying revenge, but on difficult, honest work. A man near the front, elderly, missing an arm, spoke. My son was executed for sedition 20 years ago. Morden's evidence showed he was plotting against the crown. His voice cracked. Last night, I learned the truth. He was trying to expose a corrupt tax collector. He was innocent. Died screaming his innocence while I believed the lies. Aldrich stepped forward. I authorized that execution. The final decision was mine. If you want my life in exchange. I want my son back, the man shouted. But I can't have that. Nothing you do will return him. He took a shaking breath. So what I'll settle for is this. Make sure no other father loses a son to lies. Build a kingdom where truth doesn't get you killed. Slowly, others in the crowd began nodding. A vote was taken, not formal, not legally binding, but real. Citizens speaking their choice, rebuild or tear down. Start again or burn it all. The decision was neither unanimous nor comfortable. Many voted for Aldrich's abdication, for trials and executions, for revolutionary purging. Their pain was legitimate, their anger righteous. But the majority, slim but definite, chose the harder path. Over the following weeks, the kingdom began its painful reconstruction. Tribunals were established with equal representation from all social classes. Every decision Morden had influenced was reviewed. Prisoners were released, exiles recalled, families compensated. Captain Veron volunteered for the truth reconciliation process, publicly testifying to his crimes, accepting whatever judgment came. His soldiers followed his example. Most faced prison time, but reduced through their cooperation and genuine remorse. The falsely accused were exonerated. The genuinely guilty faced justice, but justice tempered by understanding that most had been trapped in systems larger than themselves. It wasn't perfect. Truth without mercy could be cruel. Mercy without truth could enable. The kingdom struggled to find balance, stumbled frequently, made new mistakes while correcting old ones. But it was real. Honest. Growing. Liora stood in the palace gardens 6 months later, watching 3 no longer tiny wolves chase each other through spring flowers. They'd grown to the size of large dogs, their silver coats gleaming, eyes still luminous with ancient wisdom. But now they could choose when to reveal truth, had learned to modulate their power so people could have private thoughts alongside public accountability. Silverlight bounded up to her, tail wagging. Still the smallest, still the one who'd been born dead and resurrected by moonlight. Hungry, the feeling through their bond radiated with cheerful insistence. You're always hungry, Liora said, scratching behind velvet ears. They're growing wolves, Aldrich said, joining her with 2 plates of food from the kitchens. Apparently their metabolism is remarkable. They'd fallen into this comfortable partnership that was slowly, carefully becoming something more. Nothing rushed, nothing forced. Just 2 people who'd been broken by truth and were rebuilding together. Another petition hearing this afternoon, Aldrich said. Family seeking compensation for land seized 30 years ago. Will you grant it? If the evidence supports their claim, yes. Even if it bankrupts the treasury. He smiled ruefully. Truth is expensive. Truth is priceless, Liora corrected. We just got used to the discount rate lies offered. The other two pups, Truthseeker and Shadowmender, as they'd become known, joined them. The five stood together in the garden as citizens passed through on the new public walking paths that crossed palace grounds. People waved. Some with genuine warmth, some with lingering suspicion. Both were valid. A young girl ran up, eyes wide. "Can I pet them?" "Ask them," Liora said. "They'll tell you." The girl approached Truthseeker solemnly. "May I pet you, please?" The wolf lowered its head in consent, and the child's delighted laughter rang across the garden. "This is what we're building," Aldrich said quietly. "A kingdom where even children can approach power without fear." "We're not there yet." "No. But we're trying. That has to count for something." Liora looked at him, really looked. Saw a man carrying impossible guilt with as much grace as anyone could. Saw someone choosing daily to be better than he'd been. Saw possibility. "It counts for everything," she said. Their hands found each other, fingers intertwining. Not a promise, not yet. Just acknowledgement that something was growing between them, honest and unhurried. The pups howled in harmony, not mourning but declaring. The sound carried across the capital, across the countryside, a reminder that truth lived in the kingdom now. Truth that watched, that judged, but also healed. Citizens looked up from their work, their meals, their lives. Some smiled. Some sighed. All remembered. Liora pulled the pups close, feeling their warmth, their power, their trust. "Your mother collapsed at my door begging for help. What arrived hours later, what you became, shook the kingdom to its foundations. But what you're building now, what we're all building." She looked at Aldrich, at Varen walking past with a work crew repairing palace damage, at citizens moving freely through spaces that used to be forbidden, at a kingdom learning to live honestly after decades of comfortable lies. "What we're building now is worth every moment of pain it took to get here." Silverlight looked up at her with eyes like captured starlight and radiated pure contentment. The kingdom was broken. The kingdom was healing. The kingdom was learning that those two states could coexist, that brokenness acknowledged was the first step toward wholeness. And three small wolves, born during a once-in-a-century alignment, born of desperation and magic and a mother's last sacrifice, stood guard over that fragile, precious growth. Truth had come home to Valdris. And it was here to stay. The end. If this story of sacrifice, truth, and redemption moved you, don't let it end here. Hit that like button to show your support for stories that challenge us to choose compassion over comfort and truth over convenience. Subscribe so you never miss tales of transformation and hope in dark times. And share this video with someone who needs to be reminded that broken kingdoms, and broken people, can heal when they finally face the truth. Drop a comment below. What would you do if you opened your door to find a desperate guardian seeking sanctuary? Would you risk everything for truth, or would survival win out? Let's talk about the impossible choices that define who we truly are. And if you want more stories about courage in the face of impossible odds, check out our playlist of epic fantasy tales where ordinary people become extraordinary through the choices they make. Remember, truth is expensive, but it's priceless. And sometimes, the greatest power isn't destroying what's corrupt, it's healing what's broken.